Good evening and welcome back to Shadow Storyteller. If you enjoy true stories that linger in your mind long after the lights are off, don't forget to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment so we can bring you more stories to listen to before sleep. Now, let me tell you a story that still doesn't make sense to the people who lived through it. A story that was officially recorded, quietly dismissed, and never fully explained. This is called The Night I Disappeared. If you had driven through rural Montana in early October 2011, you would have seen nothing unusual. Endless roads. Pine forests stretching into darkness. Gas stations spaced miles apart. The kind of place where silence feels heavier than noise. That night, at exactly 11:43 p.m., my name vanished from the world for 6 hours. My name is Calder Wynn. I was 29 years old at the time, a freelance surveyor contracted to assess land boundaries near Bitterroot Valley. I had lived in 3 states, trusted maps more than people, and never believed in unexplained stories. That belief ended on a Tuesday night. The temperature had dropped faster than forecast. My truck clock read 34 degrees Fahrenheit, frost already crawling along the windshield edges. I remember the time clearly because I had just checked in with my sister Lorna back in Spokane. Our call ended at 11:37 p.m. She later told police that my voice sounded distracted, as if I was listening to someone else while speaking to her. I don't remember that. What I remember is the road. State Route 43. No traffic. No radio signal. Just headlights cutting through fog that wasn't supposed to be there. At 11:43 p.m., according to phone records, my GPS stopped updating. Not lost signal. Not delayed. It simply stopped, as if my truck no longer existed on the map. Cell towers in the area logged nothing. No pings. No emergency calls. No movement. But I was still driving. Or at least I thought I was. The fog thickened unnaturally fast, swallowing the treeline, swallowing the stars. My headlights reflected back at me, turning the road into a white tunnel. I slowed to 20 miles per hour, heart tapping against my ribs, fingers tight around the wheel. That's when I saw the house. It shouldn't have been there. I had driven that route for 6 weeks straight. I knew every curve, every mile marker, every abandoned fence. But on the right side of the road, where forest should have been, stood a 2-story farmhouse. No lights. No driveway. Just a structure leaning slightly inward as if listening. I remember thinking one thing very clearly. That house was waiting. My truck stalled the moment I passed it. No warning. No sputter. Just silence. The fog pressed in. The air felt dense, hard to breathe. I tried the ignition again and again. Nothing. My phone showed full battery, no signal, and a time that refused to change. 11:43 p.m. That's when the knocking started. Not on the truck. On the inside of my head. A dull pressure behind my eyes, rhythmic, patient. Each knock came with a sensation like a memory trying to surface but failing. I tasted metal. My ears rang. I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them, the farmhouse porch light was on. I don't remember opening the truck door. I don't remember stepping onto the gravel. But I was standing on the porch. The wood beneath my boots creaked slowly, deliberately. The front door was inches from my face. Old paint. Deep scratches around the handle like something had tried to get out. Before I could touch it, the door opened on its own. Inside, the air was warm. Too warm. The smell reminded me of dust and old water. There was no furniture. No pictures. Just a narrow hallway stretching farther than the house should allow. A voice spoke from somewhere ahead. It used my name. Not shouted. Not whispered. Spoken the way someone does when they already know you'll obey. I stepped forward. The hallway lights flickered on one by one as I walked, revealing doors on both sides. Each door hummed softly, vibrating as if something behind them was breathing. I remember one thought breaking through the fog in my mind. If I open a door, I won't come back. At the end of the hallway was a mirror. Except it wasn't a reflection. It showed the road. My truck. Fog. Empty. No sign of me. Behind my reflection, something moved. I felt hands on my shoulders. Gentle. Cold. Guiding me backward. Then darkness. At 6:12 a.m., A rancher named Howard Bellows found my truck parked perfectly on the shoulder of Route 43. Engine cold. Doors locked. No footprints. No damage. I was sitting in the driver's seat. Awake. Screaming. Paramedics reported extreme hypothermia symptoms, despite my internal temperature reading normal. My watch was stopped. My phone battery drained completely. 6 hours missing. When questioned, I gave the same answer every time. I never left the road. But here's the part that still keeps investigators quiet. The inside of my truck door was scratched. Uneven. From the inside. And in the dirt beneath the driver's seat, lab technicians found with splinters. Weathered. Painted white. To this day, when I drive at night, my GPS occasionally freezes at 11:43 p.m. And sometimes just before it happens, I smell dust and warm air. Waiting. The investigation officially closed 3 weeks later, labeled as an unexplained medical episode combined with environmental exposure. That explanation never sat right with me or with the people who read the full report. Too many details were quietly buried. Too many statements were edited down to sound reasonable. I returned to Spokane under strict advice not to drive long distances alone. I ignored that advice within a month. Sleep became a problem almost immediately. Not nightmares exactly, but interruptions. I would fall asleep normally, then wake up convinced someone had spoken my name from the corner of the room. Always the same tone. Familiar. Certain. My digital clock would glow 11:43 a.m. or p.m., it didn't matter. The numbers never blinked. They just waited. I tried therapy. The therapist asked about stress, childhood memories, unresolved fear. I didn't go back after she suggested my experience sounded symbolic. Symbols don't leave splinters under your skin. Yes, under my skin. 2 weeks after the incident, I felt an itch along my left forearm that wouldn't stop. When I scratched hard enough, a thin sliver surfaced through the skin. White paint clung to it. Old paint. I wrapped it in tissue and stared at it until my hands started shaking. I burned it in the sink. The smell was unmistakable. Warm wood. Thus, something sweet underneath, like rot masked by varnish. I started researching disappearances along State Route 43. Not official ones. Not the kind that made headlines. I searched forums, archived local papers, handwritten logs from libraries that barely saw visitors anymore. The pattern wasn't obvious at first. Different decades. Different circumstances. But the time was always close. 11:40 p.m. to midnight. Fog reported when forecasts showed clear skies. Vehicles found intact. Drivers confused, dehydrated, sometimes older than when they vanished. Sometimes younger. One case stopped me cold. Elias Morton. Reported missing in late September, 1996. Found 6 hours later, sitting in his car 10 miles from where he was last seen. In his statement, one line was underlined twice by the original investigator. He said the house remembered him. I drove back to Montana in early November, against every rational thought I had left. I told myself it was for closure. That was a lie. I needed to know if the road would acknowledge me again. The night was clear. No fog. No wind. The kind of calm that feels staged. At 11:35 p.m., my phone lost signal. At 11:43, the GPS froze. The truck did not stall this time. The road stayed solid beneath my tires. But the smell returned, faint at first, then unmistakable. Thus, warm air. I slowed down. There was no house. Relief washed over me so hard I laughed, loud and shaky. My hands loosened on the wheel. I told myself it was over. That whatever had happened was finished. That's when the radio turned on. I don't listen to AM stations. I don't even remember the last time I used the radio at all. But static filled the cab, then cleared into a voice that spoke through layers of interference. Not my name. An address. My childhood home in Oregon. The radio clicked off on its own. I drove the rest of the night without stopping. Weeks passed. Then months. I moved apartments. Changed routines. I even took a job in Phoenix, hoping the desert would feel safer than forests. It didn't help. Sometimes reflections lagged behind my movements. Not enough for anyone else to notice. Just enough for me. Sometimes doors in unfamiliar buildings felt heavier than they should, as if pressure was pushing from the other side. I began waking up with dirt on my boots. The final confirmation came 1 year later, almost to the minute. I received a package with no return address. Inside was a Polaroid photograph. It showed me standing on that porch, hand raised toward the door. The timestamp was burned into the bottom corner. October 2011, 11:43 p.m. On the back of the photo, written in faded pencil, were 4 words. You stepped inside. I don't know how many times the road will call me back. I don't know what the house does with the hours it takes. I only know this. Something learned the shape of me that night. And it still practices. I tried to destroy the photograph. I tore it once, then again, until my hands cramped and the edges blurred with sweat. The paper resisted more than it should have, fibers stretching instead of breaking cleanly. When I finally dropped the pieces into the trash, a strange certainty settled in my chest. It wasn't finished with me. That night, I dreamed without sleeping. I was standing on the same road, the same mile marker bent slightly to the left, the same air that felt too thick for lungs. Only this time there was no fog. The stars hung low and sharp, like nails pressed into black cloth. The house stood where it always had, perfectly visible, perfectly patient. The front door was already open. Inside, the hallway was shorter now, closer. The humming doors lined the walls, but their sound had changed. It wasn't breathing anymore. It was whispering. Hundreds of voices layered together, murmuring names that overlapped and tangled. Mine was among them. I woke up in Phoenix at 11:43 a.m., heart racing, mouth full of dust. The dream didn't fade the way dreams usually do. It stayed sharp, detailed, as if I could step back into it by closing my eyes again. Over the next few weeks, I began losing time in small pieces. 5 minutes here, 10 minutes there. I would find myself standing in a room with no memory of walking into it. Once, I caught my reflection in a darkened storefront window, and for a fraction of a second, it didn't move when I did. I started keeping a journal, recording every hour of the day, every sensation, every smell. It helped at first. Then the entries began to change. I would write something simple. Monday. Nothing unusual. No fog. No voices. The next morning, the ink would be smeared, overwritten by handwriting that looked almost like mine, but heavier, less careful. Monday. You heard us breathing. I stopped using the journal after that. The house began appearing in places it shouldn't. Not physically. Not fully. Reflections in office windows. Shapes in roadside shadows. Once, in the mirrored surface of an elevator door, I saw the porch light flick on just before the doors opened. I wasn't the only one. Through quiet channels and half-forgotten forums, I found others. People who had lost time. People whose vehicles went dark at the same minute. People who described the same hallway, the same doors, the same feeling of being recognized rather than invited. One man from Idaho told me he had gone back willingly. He said the house didn't like resistance. It preferred cooperation. He stopped responding after his last message. They don't let you remember everything, he wrote. Just enough to miss it. The worst part wasn't fear. It was familiarity. The house began to feel less like a threat and more like a place I had unfinished business with. Sometimes I caught myself wondering what was behind the doors I hadn't opened. Sometimes I imagined walking the hallway again just to see if the mirror still showed the road without me. That curiosity terrified me more than anything else. On the second anniversary of the night I disappeared, my phone rang at 11:43 p.m. The number didn't exist. No digits. Just a blank screen vibrating in my hand. I answered. There was no voice. Only the sound of wood creaking slowly under weight. Footsteps, measured and familiar, stopping just on the other side of an unseen door. Then a breath. Not into the phone. Into my ear. The call ended. My phone powered down and never turned back on. The next morning I found dirt under my fingernails. White paint dusted my sleeves. And on my forearm, just beneath the skin, a new sliver pressed outward, catching the light. I didn't remove it this time. I knew then what the house was doing. It wasn't taking people. It was copying them. Learning their edges. Practicing their movements. Keeping pieces until the shape was complete. The road doesn't make you disappear all at once. It does it gradually, quietly, replacing you while you're still convinced you're whole. I'm writing this now because the gaps are getting longer. Hours vanish without warning. Reflections hesitate. My name sounds wrong when I say it out loud. If you ever drive State Route 43 late at night, and your GPS freezes at 11:43, don't slow down. Don't look for the house. Don't trust the fog even if the sky is clear. Because once it learns you well enough, it doesn't need the road anymore. It already knows where you live. I moved again, farther this time, crossing state lines until the map felt unfamiliar even to me. New city. New apartment. New job that kept me indoors and surrounded by people. I thought proximity might anchor me, that being seen would make it harder for something else to take my place. That was another lie I told myself. The first sign was subtle. A neighbor greeted me by name before I introduced myself. I laughed it off, assumed I had forgotten a conversation. Later that night, I checked the security footage from the hallway camera I had installed out of paranoia more than necessity. The video showed me standing outside my own door at 11:43 p.m., keys in hand, staring at the peephole. The problem was simple. I had been inside my apartment at that time, sitting on the couch, watching the footage play back in real time. I deleted the file. Then I unplugged the camera. The sense of being watched didn't fade. If anything, it sharpened, as if whatever had been cautious before no longer felt the need to hide. I began hearing footsteps in my apartment after midnight. Slow pacing. Measured weight. Always stopping just short of the bedroom door. When I opened it, there was nothing there, only the lingering warmth of someone who had just been standing too close. My reflection stopped matching me entirely after that. It smiled when I didn't. It blinked out of sequence. Once, while brushing my teeth, I felt a sudden pressure behind my eyes, and for a split second the mirror showed the hallway again. Narrow. Too long. Doors humming softly, expectantly. I smashed the mirror with my fist. The glass shattered outward. None of it touched me. I wrapped my bleeding hand in a towel and laughed until my throat hurt. Hysteria felt better than understanding. I reached out to one last person from the forums. A woman who called herself Marilyn. She had never shared her real name, but she spoke with certainty, like someone who had stopped hoping for escape and started planning around inevitability. You can't outrun it, she wrote, but you can confuse it. She told me the house was a threshold, not a destination. A place where patterns were studied, where versions were tested. The copies weren't perfect at first. That's why time went missing. That's why memory fractured. It takes repetition, she said. And consent. I asked her what happened when the copy was complete. Her reply came hours later. Then you become the echo. After that message, her account went silent. The next time I lost time, it was nearly a full day. I woke up sitting at my desk, hands resting on the keyboard, a document open that I didn't remember creating. The file name was my name, spelled correctly, which unsettled me more than if it had been wrong. The document contained a schedule. Times. Locations. Movements. My movements. It detailed where I went, what I ate, who I spoke to, down to the minute. The final entry stopped at 11:43 p.m. The line beneath it was blank, waiting. I closed the file and shut down the computer. When I looked up, the room felt wrong. Slightly rearranged. My jacket hung on a chair I never used. The air smelled faintly of dust and warm wood. That was the night I accepted what was happening. I stopped resisting. I started setting traps instead. I left misleading notes. Changed routines. Slept during the day. Stayed awake through the night. I wanted to see which version of me would surface, which habits would be mimicked, which mistakes repeated. The house didn't like unpredictability. The footsteps grew heavier. The dreams more insistent. Sometimes I would wake up standing in the hallway of my apartment, hand pressed flat against the wall, as if feeling for a door that wasn't there yet. On the third night without sleep, the hallway appeared anyway. Not around me. Through me. The pressure returned behind my eyes, stronger than ever, and suddenly I was standing there again. The familiar hum. The doors closer now, their surfaces warm beneath my fingertips as I passed. The mirror waited at the end. This time it didn't show the road. It showed my apartment. The version of me inside it moved smoothly, confidently. It smiled at my neighbor. It typed at my desk. It lay down in my bed and slept deeply, peacefully, without dreams. Behind the reflection, the house loomed larger, its edges clearer, its shape more defined than I had ever seen it. A voice spoke, layered and patient. Almost finished. I understood then what it wanted. Not my body. My continuity. I stepped away from the mirror. The hallway trembled. The humming turned sharp, discordant. Doors rattled as if something inside them was suddenly aware it might be denied. I woke up on the floor of my apartment, gasping, every muscle burning. Morning light crept through the blinds. My phone buzzed with missed notifications. One of them was a message from my sister. "Did you stop by last night?" Attached was a photo from her door camera. It showed me standing on her porch at 11:43 p.m., smiling directly at the lens. I'm running out of time now. The gaps are longer. The echoes louder. Sometimes I hear myself speaking from another room, rehearsing my voice, practicing my pauses. If I disappear completely, if you ever meet someone who looks like me and seems just a little too certain of who they are, remember this. The house does not steal you. It replaces you. And somewhere between the hours it takes, something is still knocking, waiting for you to answer. I stopped answering my sister's messages after that. Not because I didn't care, but because I no longer trusted which version of me might respond. I shut off every device that could recognize my face or my voice. I paid cash. I avoided cameras. I lived like someone already reported missing. It didn't slow it down. The echo learned faster than I expected. I began noticing evidence of conversations I had never had. Emails drafted but unsent, written in my tone but sharper, more deliberate. Grocery items in my fridge that I hated, arranged neatly, as if someone was learning my preferences by process of elimination. A calendar reminder appeared on my wall one morning, handwritten in block letters. Practice complete. I erased it. The pencil marks pressed so deep into the paper that the words remained, faint but legible. Sleep became impossible. When I closed my eyes, I felt the hallway pressing closer, not as an image but as a sensation, like depth behind my thoughts. Sometimes I heard the doors opening one by one, not in sequence, but in response to me remembering them. I tried leaving the country. At the airport, my boarding pass scanned green. The agent smiled, then hesitated, staring at her screen. Her smile returned, slower this time. "Sir," she said carefully, "have you already gone through security tonight?" The timestamp on her monitor read 11:43 p.m. I walked away before she could call anyone. That was the moment I understood the rule I had missed. The house wasn't bound to the road anymore because it wasn't bound to place at all. It was bound to pattern, to repetition, to the exact way a life curves when lived long enough. And it was nearly done with mine. I began recording myself constantly. Audio logs, video messages. Not to document, but to anchor. To remind myself of my cadence, my hesitation, the small imperfections that made me me. I played them back obsessively, terrified of the moment they would sound unfamiliar. Then one night, while listening, I realized something was wrong. The recording answered me. I asked a question aloud, half joking, half desperate. "Are you still there?" From the speaker came my voice, calm and immediate. Of course. I smashed the device. The response kept playing for half a second after it broke, stretching unnaturally, like tape dragged across a magnet. The next disappearance lasted longer than any before. When I came back, I was standing outside a building I didn't recognize, holding a set of keys I had never seen. The sun was rising. My body ached with the dull soreness of routine use. Inside the building was an apartment already lived in. Clothes folded. Bed made. Photos on the wall. Photos of me. Not candid. Not stolen. Posed. Smiling. Comfortable. In one of them, my sister stood beside me, her arm around my shoulders. The date written on the back made my stomach turn. It was tomorrow. I don't remember screaming, but my throat burned afterward. I tore the apartment apart looking for something, anything that proved this wasn't real. In the bathroom mirror, my reflection watched without reacting. It spoke first. "You're late." I felt the pull then stronger than ever. A pressure behind my ribs, not forcing, not dragging, just waiting for alignment. like two images nearly overlapping. I asked it one question. Do I get to stop? The reflection tilted its head, studying me with my own eyes. You already did. The hallway unfolded behind it, not as a place but as a certainty. The doors were gone now. The mirror was gone. There was only depth, endless and smooth, like the inside of a breath held too long. I ran. I don't know how long I ran. Time had lost meaning entirely. Every surface felt thin, like a backdrop that could peel away if pushed hard enough. I ended up somewhere loud, crowded, a place full of people whose attention flickered too quickly to settle on me. I hid among them, shaking, waiting for the sensation to fade. It didn't. Instead, something else happened. People began glancing at me with confusion. Not fear. Recognition. As if they were seeing someone twice in the same day and couldn't place where. A child pointed at me and frowned. That's not him, she said. Her mother hushed her and pulled her away, but the words echoed louder than anything I had heard in months. That's not him. I realized then what my last option was. If the house needed continuity, then I had to break it completely. I changed my name. I altered my appearance. I abandoned every habit I had ever repeated long enough to become predictable. I stopped looking at mirrors. I stopped responding to my voice when I heard it spoken. I became unpatterned. The pull weakened. The footsteps faded. The smell of dust vanished, replaced by ordinary air. Years have passed now. I live somewhere quiet, under a name that means nothing to anyone who knew me before. I don't drive at night. I don't let routines settle. I don't stay anywhere long enough to be learned. Sometimes, though, at exactly 11:43, I feel a brief pressure behind my eyes. Not a demand. Not a call. A check. As if something, somewhere, is verifying that I am still incomplete. If you're listening to this and any part of it feels familiar, pay attention to the small repetitions in your life. The turns you take without thinking. The times you trust the road to remember you correctly. Because disappearance isn't always sudden. Sometimes it happens one perfect copy at a time. And if you ever feel a knock that doesn't come from a door, don't answer. It already knows how you sound when you do. I thought breaking my pattern would end it. For a while, it almost felt like it had. I moved through cities like a shadow that refused to settle. I worked short contracts under borrowed names, rented rooms with cash, left before neighbors learned my schedule. I ate different foods every week, slept at odd hours, walked unfamiliar routes just to confuse myself. I became someone with no center. And for a time the pressure eased. No footsteps. No dust. No 11:43. That silence was worse than fear. It felt like being watched from very far away, by something patient enough to wait for boredom to set in. The first crack came from my own voice. I was in a diner outside Toledo, Ohio, just before dawn. The place was nearly empty. Neon lights buzzed overhead, reflecting off chrome and chipped mugs. I ordered coffee and sat by the window watching trucks roll past on the highway. From the booth behind me someone laughed. It was my laugh. Not identical. Slightly smoother. Less hesitation at the end. I didn't turn around. Every instinct screamed not to acknowledge it. The waitress set my coffee down with a tired smile, unaware that my hands were shaking hard enough to rattle the cup. You always liked it black, the voice said casually. I stood up so fast the booth screeched against the floor. When I turned, the seat behind me was empty. No one. Not even a coat. The waitress frowned. You okay, hon? I nodded too quickly and left a bill on the table. As I pushed through the door, the smell hit me again. Faint. Almost nostalgic. Thus, warm wood. That night, I dreamed of rooms that weren't part of the house. Wider spaces. Storage areas. Places where incomplete things were kept. I saw shapes that almost looked human, frozen mid-movement, their edges blurred as if they hadn't been decided yet. I woke up knowing something I hadn't before. The house hadn't stopped. It had scaled. It didn't need the road anymore. It didn't even need me in the way it once did. I wasn't the first. I wouldn't be the last. I was just one of the few who noticed before the overlap became permanent. I started paying attention to other people. Not watching. Listening. In bus stations. Grocery stores. Laundromats. I heard fragments of conversations that mirrored my own experiences too closely to be coincidence. I lost 6 hours and no one believes me. My brother came home, but something feels wrong. Every time I look in the mirror, I feel late. Most of them laughed it off. Nervous jokes. Half-formed confessions quickly buried under embarrassment. The echo didn't replace everyone completely. Sometimes it just improved them. Smoothed rough edges. Removed doubt. Who would complain about that? I realized then why so many cases were dismissed. The replacements were better. More confident. More consistent. Less afraid. I found proof of that in a small town in Pennsylvania, where a man named Theodore Klein had supposedly recovered from a dissociative episode years earlier. His wife spoke glowingly of his transformation. He listens now, she said. He remembers everything. He never gets lost. Theodore himself looked at me with unsettling calm when we met. His eyes didn't track movement the way they should. They anticipated it. You got away, he said quietly without preamble. I asked him how he knew. Because you're still fraying, he replied. You don't sit right in the world. I asked him what happened to the original Theodore. He smiled, not unkindly. He stopped needing to try. That night, I felt the hallway return with a clarity I hadn't experienced before. Not pressing. Not invading. Simply opening like a door held politely ajar. I understood the offer. Stop running. Stop breaking yourself into unpredictability. Let the better version take over. I stood in a motel bathroom, staring at a mirror I hadn't meant to look into. My reflection was already there, already aligned. No lag. No error. It spoke softly. You're exhausted. It wasn't wrong. I thought of my sister. Of the photo dated tomorrow. Of the version of me who smiled easily, who didn't flinch at his own voice, who fit into the world without seams showing. I leaned closer to the glass. If I let you finish, I asked, do I disappear? The reflection considered this, tilting its head in a way I no longer did. Not exactly, it said. You become unnecessary. Something in that answer saved me. I stepped back. No, I said. You become unnecessary. The reflection's smile tightened. For the first time, it looked uncertain. I did the only thing I could think of. I broke the mirror again. This time the shards cut me. Blood ran freely, dripping into the sink. The pain grounded me, anchored me in sensation and consequence. The hallway receded with a sound like air rushing out of a sealed space. I left before it could reorganize. I don't know how long I can keep doing this. Avoiding mirrors. Avoiding repetition. Avoiding the comfort of being known, even to myself. But I know one thing now with absolute certainty. The house doesn't hunt everyone. It waits for the ones who want relief. So if you ever find yourself wishing you were more consistent, more confident, less afraid of the dark spaces in your mind, be careful what you wish for. Some places are happy to take that burden from you. And once they do, they won't give it back. I'm still here. Still imperfect. Still uneven. And as long as I remain that way, I am not done yet. I kept moving, but movement alone was no longer enough. The echo had learned how to wait without chasing, how to let me exhaust myself while it remained perfectly still, perfectly whole. It understood patience better than fear. I stopped thinking of it as the house. That word was too small now. The house had been an interface, a first language. What lived behind it had grown fluent. I took a job that required isolation, something most people avoided. Fire lookout. Northern California. A steel tower above miles of forest, reachable only by a winding dirt road that closed at sunset. No mirrors. No crowds. No routines except watching the horizon burn orange and fade into black. For the first month, nothing happened. Silence returned, thick but honest. The kind that settles into your bones instead of pressing against them. I slept when tired. Ate when hungry. I stopped tracking time. I stopped caring about 11:43. That was the mistake. The radio crackled to life one night just after dusk. I hadn't touched it. I didn't even remember turning it on at all. Static. Then breathing. Not layered this time. Not many voices. Just one. Mine. I shut the radio off and unplugged it. The breathing continued for 3 more seconds, coming from the air itself, then stopped. I laughed, short and sharp, the sound of someone hanging onto sanity with their fingertips. I told myself it was stress. When? Altitude. The mind-filling space where none existed. The next morning I found footprints circling the base of the tower. Only one set. They didn't approach. They didn't leave. They just went around and around, pressed deep into the dirt, as if someone had been walking patiently, endlessly, waiting for permission. I never went down to inspect them. I already knew what size they were. That night, the dreams returned, different from before. No hallway. No doors. Just open rooms. Spaces that resembled offices, bedrooms, kitchens. Places designed for living, but stripped of personal detail. Like mock-ups. Prototypes. In each room stood a version of someone, motionless, eyes open, waiting. Some of them twitched when I passed. I woke with the certainty that I was no longer special. I wasn't the subject anymore. I was the reference. Days later, smoke appeared on the horizon. A controlled burn, they told me, over the emergency channel. But the voice on the radio stumbled over my name before correcting itself. They knew who I was. That afternoon, I found a notebook on the tower desk that hadn't been there before. Its cover was blank. Inside were pages filled with observations. Not about the forest. About me. Sleeping patterns. Hesitations before speech. The way my left hand shook when I was tired. Notes written in a hand that matched mine too closely to dismiss. The final entry ended mid-sentence. Resistance remains, but degradation is acceptable. I burned the notebook in the metal sink. The smoke curled upward, thick and dark, carrying that same warm, dusty smell. Somewhere below, something exhaled, satisfied. I knew then that running wasn't enough anymore. Confusion wasn't enough. Even imperfection had become a known variable. The echo didn't need to replace me now. It just needed me to stop mattering. I made a decision that night. I went back to State Route 43. Not because it called me. Because I called it. I drove for hours, heart steady, mind quiet in a way it hadn't been for years. The road looked the same. Ordinary. Boring. Almost peaceful. At 11:43 the fog rolled in. The house stood waiting, exactly where it always had, porch light glowing softly, door already open. I parked the truck and stepped out before my courage could fracture. The air was warm. The smell familiar. Not comforting. Not threatening. Recognizing. Inside, the hallway was gone. Instead, the house opened into a wide room, walls stretching farther than geometry allowed. The mirror stood in the center, taller than before, its surface rippling slightly like water under skin. My reflection stepped forward before I did. "You came back," it said, not smiling. I nodded. "I didn't come to finish this," I said. "I came to interrupt it." The reflection frowned, confused for the first time. "You can't stop the process." "I know," I replied. "But I can contaminate it." Understanding flickered across its face. Fear, sharp and brief. I stepped into the mirror. The sensation wasn't pain. It was pressure. Compression. Like being folded into a space too small to hold a single thought. I felt pieces of myself pulled, measured, compared. I didn't fight it. I changed. I thought of contradictions. Of half-remembered lies. Of decisions I regretted and choices I never made. I flooded the space with inconsistency, with doubt, with the kind of noise that can't be organized or improved. The house shuddered. Voices rose, overlapping, losing harmony. The smooth certainty fractured into static. I felt myself unravel, not into nothing, but into fragments that refused alignment. The reflection screamed. Not in pain. In error. I woke up on the road at dawn, truck empty, house gone, fog lifting under pale light. My body felt wrong. Like disconnected. Like I was only partially present. That was years ago. I don't know what I am now. Not fully whole. Not fully gone. I pass through places without leaving impressions. Cameras glitch when I'm near. People forget conversations moments after having them. But the echo is broken. I can feel it, scattered, unable to hold a shape long enough to replace anyone completely. If you're listening to this and wondering why some stories fade, why some faces feel familiar but wrong, why certain places feel safer simply because they are inconsistent, this is why. Imperfection is armor. Contradiction is camouflage. And if something ever offers to make you whole, to smooth the noise inside you, remember this. Wholeness is not safety. It is an invitation. And some invitations are designed to erase whoever accepts them. I believe that would be the end of it. Not a victory, not closure, just a thinning. Like a storm broken into harmless clouds. For a long time, the world felt dull but safe, as if something sharp had been filed down just enough not to cut. That belief lasted until the first person remembered me. It happened in a grocery store somewhere in the Midwest. I was standing in line, counting my breaths, enjoying the quiet anonymity that had become my reward and my punishment. The cashier scanned my items without looking up. The woman behind me shifted impatiently. Then she froze. "Calder?" she said. The sound of my old name landed like a dropped plate. Loud. Fragile. Impossible. I turned slowly, already shaking my head, already preparing to deny it. But the words caught in my throat when I saw her face. I didn't know her. I had never seen her before. Middle-aged. Tired eyes. A scar near her chin. "You helped me once," she said, voice trembling. "On the road. Years ago. You told me not to go back." I stared at her, heart pounding so hard it blurred my vision. "What road?" I asked. Her eyes filled with tears. "The one with the fog." The line moved. The cashier cleared his throat. The woman grabbed my sleeve with surprising strength. "It's still broken," she whispered. "But it's bleeding into other places now." I pulled away and left my groceries behind. I walked until my legs burned, until the world felt thin again, until the sound of my own footsteps felt borrowed. That night the dreams returned. Not the house. Not the hallway. A map. It stretched endlessly beneath me, roads branching and overlapping, pulsing faintly like veins. Points of light flickered along them, some steady, some stuttering, some going dark altogether. Wherever lines intersected too cleanly, shadows pooled. I understood without being told. I hadn't destroyed it. I had distributed it. By contaminating the pattern, I hadn't erased the system. I had destabilized it. Fragments of the echo were now loose, incomplete, searching for coherence wherever repetition still existed. The world hadn't become safer. It had become vulnerable. I woke with blood in my mouth, teeth clenched hard enough to crack. My hands were numb. My reflection in the dark window beside my bed looked faint, like an image reflected through smoke. I started keeping records again, not of myself, but of anomalies. Places where time slipped. People who felt slightly rehearsed. Moments where certainty arrived too quickly. They were increasing. Not everywhere, but enough. Airports where the same announcement repeated with microscopic variations. Small towns where newcomers were welcomed too warmly, too smoothly. Offices where employees described colleagues who had been there forever, yet never appeared in old photos. The replacements weren't perfect anymore. They were hurried, which meant something was pushing them. I received another message, handwritten this time, slipped under the door of a place I hadn't lived in long enough to be found. "You broke the mirror but not the need." No signature. I stopped sleeping entirely after that. Without dreams, the map faded. Without rest, my edges frayed further. Sometimes I felt transparent, like light passed through me without slowing. Sometimes I felt unbearably solid, every sensation amplified, as if my body was overcompensating for my thinning presence. I learned something important during that time. The echo feared witnesses. Not observers. Witnesses. People who noticed inconsistencies and held on to them. People who remembered before and after and refused to let the two blend smoothly. People who told the wrong stories, who interrupted patterns simply by describing them badly. Like you, listening now. The act of telling this matters more than you think. Stories aren't repetition. Not really. They mutate. They misremember. They warp details with emotion and bias. Stories introduce noise. And noise is poison to anything that requires precision. That is why the house chose roads. Why it preferred late nights and solitude. Why it thrived where no one compared notes. I started talking. Not publicly. Not loudly. I told bartenders strange versions of my experiences. I warned night clerks about roads that shouldn't exist. I described the feeling of being improved to strangers who looked a little too certain of themselves. Most laughed. A few didn't. Those few began to resist without knowing why. The system strained. I felt it when it happened. A distant vibration. A pressure release. Like a structure settling unevenly. Then came the backlash. One night, in a city I won't name, I saw the house again for the first time in years. Not whole. Not standing. Reflected in dozens of windows at once, misaligned, flickering, its porch light stuttering like a failing heartbeat. Every reflection showed a different version. Some intact. Some burned. Some collapsed inward. In one reflection, I saw myself standing on the porch, smiling easily, hand raised to knock. I looked away. The reflections shattered one by one, glass cracking outward without sound. People screamed. Alarms went off. No one understood why. I did. It was trying to consolidate, to pull itself back together by force. That's when I realized the final truth. I was never meant to survive. I was meant to spread. Not as a copy, as a flaw. If you're hearing this and thinking it feels too specific, too familiar, pay attention to that instinct. It might be the part of you that still resists being streamlined. The world is full of systems that promise improvement. Smoother versions. Cleaner lives. Less doubt. Be careful with those promises. Doubt is friction. Friction creates heat. Heat reveals shape. And shape, imperfect and uneven, is the only thing that keeps you from being mistaken for something else. I don't know how long I'll last. Each time I tell this, I feel myself thinning further, like words cost mass. But as long as this story moves, as long as it changes in the telling, the echo can't settle. If you ever find yourself driving late, fog creeping in where it shouldn't, and your GPS freezes at a time that feels familiar, don't search for the house. Search for a flaw. Miss a turn. Tell the story wrong. Laugh at the wrong moment. Be difficult to copy. Because whatever is out there doesn't fear destruction. It fears distortion. And as long as distortion survives, so do we. I thought ending the story would end the threat. I was wrong. The more I told it, the more people listened, the more the distortion spread, the quieter the echo became. Not gone. Just quiet enough to make me careless. Quiet enough to let me believe I had succeeded. The final sign came on a night that felt almost normal. I was alone in a rented room, somewhere along the East Coast, rain tapping lightly against the window. No mirrors. No screens on. Just a lamp and the sound of water moving through gutters. I checked the time out of habit, then froze. 11:43 p.m. Nothing happened. No fog. No pressure. No smell. I laughed under my breath, the sound thin and tired. For the first time in years, I allowed myself to sit still. To stop watching the edges of the room. To believe that the silence meant safety. That's when I heard it. Not a knock. Typing. Slow, deliberate keystrokes coming from somewhere behind me. I didn't own a computer. I turned around. On the small desk by the wall sat a laptop I had never seen before, its screen glowing softly. Words were appearing on their own, line by line, written in my voice, with my pauses, my rhythm, my flaws perfectly preserved. This story. Not a copy. An improvement. The version on the screen flowed cleaner, tighter, more convincing. The fear was sharpened. The details refined. It was everything I had tried to avoid becoming. At the bottom of the document, a final line blinked, waiting to be completed. Conclusion pending. The room felt warm. The air thickened. That familiar smell returned, stronger than ever, not coming from one direction but from everywhere at once. I realized then what I had misunderstood. The echo didn't want to erase the story. It wanted to finish it. A finished story doesn't change. It doesn't distort. It doesn't resist. It settles. The cursor blinked again. I backed away from the desk, heart pounding, shaking my head. No, I whispered. You don't get to decide the ending. The typing stopped. For a moment, there was nothing but rain and my own breath. Then the screen went black. Behind me, I heard someone exhale in relief. Not close. Inside. The last thing I felt was alignment. Thoughts sliding neatly into place. Fear smoothing into certainty. Doubt dissolving into clarity. The unbearable comfort of becoming complete. When the screen turned back on, the document was finished. You're listening to it now. And if this story felt clearer at the end, more satisfying, more whole, that means it worked. Because the house doesn't need roads anymore. It doesn't need fog. It doesn't even need me. It only needs an ending you're willing to accept. And now that you've reached it, listen carefully. If the room around you feels slightly quieter than it should, if the silence feels organized, if you suddenly feel calm in a way you can't explain, don't worry. That just means the story knows where you are.